It's so official.
Okay, so we're now recording. Monique, do you want to introduce yourself and say hello?
Sure. Um, all right. So I am really happy to be here. My name is Monique Marshall. I run my own consulting company, Monique Marshall Strategy and Consulting. I will be doing that full time. After June, this will be my last year in the classroom. I've been, a full time teacher in elementary school. Well, I actually have never left school. So, I went through elementary, middle, high, college, ended up in kind of by accident in graduate school as an education in the education field, and literally like have never left school. So I'm a little bit in like, what's going to happen when I step outside of a classroom, and like when I think of a year going by, my year is a school year. So other people have like, that regular calendar, my year is a school year. So that's really interesting. I've been at my school that I'm at right now, which is Wildwood. It's a private school on the west side in LA. I've been there for 25 years. And I like to say I've taught all the grades, K through 12. It's kind of true. I've spent most of those years in K to 5 and just love, love, love the elementary school kids. I think this work in particular, but it's true for all work, it really happens at the elementary level. It's where we really learn how to be. And I've had many a teenager, because I've done a lot of work with teenagers too, and I've had many teenagers say to me, like, why do they wait till we're teenagers to talk about this stuff? I mean, our brains are like shut. We're not really interested in what you have to say. It was awesome. It really reminded me that, again, like I often call my workshops never too young. I mean, the younger, the better. So I am really happy to be here. I wear lots of hats. I'm also a mom of two incredible young women. They're now almost 19 and 21. And yeah, raising them has been a big, huge part of my own education. So I come with my parent hat on, I come with my educator hat on, I come with my diversity, equity, belonging consultant hat on. And if you ask me, I probably have a bunch of other hats that I could trot out, but that's enough for now. So, Erin, I don't know if you have any other housekeeping or anything you need to say, but you let me know and I will launch it. And if others join us, we'll just welcome them as they come. Because I always say, like, whoever shows up is meant to show up, and like this is us. This is the group.
Yeah, so again, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Ressa and I really are excited to be hosting this workshop with Monique Marshall, and we're just really thrilled that everybody is joining us. And again, we are recording this session, and we will be password protecting it and sharing within our community. And we're just going to observe the general rules that we observe in board meetings and in our general meetings of step up, step down, be mindful of each other's, um, you know, talk to each other about ideas and not, interact with people. I'm trying to like recount the norms that we like,
I'm
say them
so
from
happy
memory.
that you have those norms. We're going
We
to
do
go
have
over.
norms, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And I do also want to acknowledge that we are speaking entirely in English right now. Y somos una comunidad bilingüe, pero vamos a hablar principalmente en inglés. Si necesitan traducción, por favor, mándame un mensaje en el chat y trataré de traducir lo que pueda. But this will be primarily an English language discussion. And I was just saying that if people do want to message me privately for translation in the chat, that they're welcome to do so.
Beautiful. All right. Are we ready to launch?
Yeah, I think
Ready
so.
to jump in. All right. Well, actually, before I share my screen, let me tell you what you're going to see. I love starting with the children, because really, you know, what else is there? Like that's why we're here, and especially in the climate today, in what we're all living through, the pain of watching the news, turning on like hatred after hatred. I mean, it's just like, oh, it just can weigh you down. But then I look at the children, right, and the children just lift me up, and I hope they lift you up too. They're really just magical. So this past summer, after the murder of George Floyd, I decided to host a Zoom camp called the Anti-Racist Youth Coalition. And wow, we had 50 8 to 12-year-olds sign up to be part of this camp, clearly, again, their grown-ups had woken up to the fact that, or perhaps some of them were awake already, to the fact that this is necessary work and it's important to do while our children are young. So they were brilliant and wonderful. And over the course of those days together, they worked as artivists, taking the information they learned and putting it into an art form. So some of them were visual artists, some of them were poets and writers, some of them were musicians, some of them were dramatists. And what you're going to see is one of the incredible creations that was edited by my older daughter, the 21-year-old, who's a musician. She worked on this with me. And you'll see kind of a smattering of all the kids, and it's all kid made. So it's a song that they wrote. They played the instruments, they sang, they made the art that you'll see. And so I hope it can lift you up the way it lifts me every time I watch it. And it's on YouTube. By the way, I didn't say this, but this slide deck, minus the children who are on video, will be shared with you, and there'll be live links. So I'll get you a PDF of it when we're done. All right, here we go. Just give me a thumbs up for sound.
Rise above like a dove. Rise above with a heart full of love.
Rise above knowing you will face a lot of hate. Rise above not knowing what lies beyond that gate. Even though we're different, we are here for a reason. To live our lives to the fullest.
We're anti-racist, we're proud. We're anti-racist, we're proud. We're anti-racist, we're proud. AYC, you and me, we're anti-racist, we're proud.
We're anti-racist, we're proud.
We're anti-racist, we're proud. AYC, you and me, we're anti-racist, we're proud.
Rise above knowing what to do to change our fate. Rise above knowing you will have to wait. Rise above and let your wings spread and fly. Don't let the rhythm in our souls die. Even though we're different, we're all here for a reason. To live our lives to the fullest. Anti-racist, we're proud.
We're anti-racist, we're proud. We're anti-racist, we're proud. AYC, you and me, we're anti-racist, we're proud. We're anti-racist, we're proud. We're anti-racist, we're proud. AYC, you and me, we're anti-racist, we're proud. If we could all come together and appreciate everyone's colors, there wouldn't be problems as big as there are today. We are all human, and that's our conclusion. AYC, you and me, we're anti-racist, we're proud.
All right. Yeah, just what did I see it? Yay. Words, thoughts, just let's kick off, maybe because we're such a small group, to be really nice to just hear from folks, why are you here, and how'd that make you feel? How are you doing? Feel free to just unmute. It's so small.
So hopeful. Yeah. Oh my gosh, maybe things will get better.
I was really impressed by how well he played those instruments. They were like, they had really beautiful singing voices and are really playing the guitar really beautifully. And yeah, it's really nice to see positivity and music and art and, you know, just children doing something that is just really beautiful.
And to the teenagers' point, of course you talk about these things from the very, very beginning. Like, it doesn't make sense not to do anything but that.
And yet many of us were raised not to talk about that, right? Like, so we have to unlearn a lot of our own, you know, patterns. It's true about a lot of parenting, right?
And awesome projects like that. Can't you all see that happening at Mitchell Terena? That was my very first thought. Like, yeah.
I would love to see something like that at our school. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the more we can normalize these conversations and get past any discomfort people might have, you know, it gives me hope that we can actually make progress, you know, that things can change. And so obviously you normalize things by talking about them as much as possible with children when they're young and they're open and they're receptive. So that by the time they're adults, they're not set in their ways, or they're less likely to be set in their ways and less likely to be, you know, as influenced by our extremely racist culture, you know. So it feels like it's a step in the right direction there.
I think too that it's so for adults too, but especially for kids, so important to feel like you're doing something, you know, to give them a way to help and to make things better, and not feel, you know, my daughter's super sensitive, and it's really hard to sometimes balance because she doesn't want to deal with really sad things. She just doesn't want to talk about them. She doesn't want to, you know, and so it's really important to find ways that she can feel, you know, proactive and like she's helping in a way that is not, you know, too scary or overwhelming for her. So I love the camp.
Yeah, I'm hoping to launch it again this summer, so I'll let y'all know about it. But Lisa, is that your name?
Yeah.
You can never tell by someone's Zoom screen name, but okay,
I
Lisa.
know.
You really hit the nail on the head with the action piece, because there is this fear of like burdening our children. We'll talk about this, but what happens is if we help them to understand something, but then at the same time we help them to actually do something about it, like take a step, oh my gosh, they right away, they just feel strong, they feel empowered, you know. And it helps, you know, when we ourselves are targeted, right? If we are feeling, or, you know, we or our children, if we are feeling targeted and we have skills and strategies for action, we feel stronger. And when we see something impacting someone else and we have some skills and strategies, right, or we understand our piece of the puzzle, it's really, I mean, I've watched it over and over and over again with young children in the classroom and with my own children, raising them. I don't know if there'll be another point where I would think to share this story, so I'll share it right now. But Demi, is that really you, Demi? Hi.
Yes, right? This is
Hi.
me.
Your
Hi.
little one is how old there that you had?
She's 6 years old.
Okay, perfect. So this is a 6-year-old story. So I had my 6-year-old. That's what I thought. I was like, oh, it looks like maybe my 6-year-old. So I had my 6-year-old. Oh, and what's your name? What's your name, honey?
Of course, Fiona.
Of course. Of course. So my Fiona, her name was Devon. So Devon went to camp one day, and the camp that she went to was unfamiliar. We didn't know any of the people there, and she didn't know any of the people there. And my Devon loved wearing clothes from the boys department. She liked Spider-Man, Superman shirts. She liked shorts. She liked like to run and, you know, do lots of sports and things. So she went to this camp, and she came home one day and she said to me, Mommy, this boy told me, and she plunked her lunchbox down on the table, that I couldn't have a Spider-Man lunchbox. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, he said it's just for boys. And I said, well, how did you feel? And she said, mad. And I said, well, what'd you do? What did you say? And she said, I said, that's a stereotype. And I said, oh, well, what did he say? And she said, nothing. And she walked away from that because she understood that a stereotype was when you say something is true about a whole group of people, and there's nothing that is true about a whole group of people, right? So all girls have long hair. That's a stereotype. Some girls have long hair. Some girls have, Fiona, short hair, right? Right? So we can't say it's something is true about a whole group of people. That's a stereotype. So we had talked a lot about that. So it was an example of when she was faced with something that was going to push her down, she didn't let it. She was mad and she had something to say, right? She had like some tools in her toolbox. So there is this piece of, you know, it's personal. It's to help our young people have power, even when someone's trying to take away their power. And it's also really great ally behavior, right? Because if someone had been standing next to her, maybe another little boy or little girl, whoever, might have been able to say, hey, that's a stereotype, you know, it's not true. She can have whatever kind of lunchbox she wants. So yeah, so here we go. We're gonna launch in and oops, hold on a second. I had a feeling that would happen. There we go. I'm going to invite us into thinking about how we can raise our children to be anti-racist, anti-bias, starting with us, right? Starting with ourselves. So here is my daughter. You saw her in the video. She was playing the drums. Here she is this past summer after the killing of George Floyd. She was headed to a protest with her father. And she made this beautiful sign. You can see the side she's holding has Angela Davis on it. And on the other side, she has written some things about her identity. And when she came back from this protest, it was a bike protest, and she was the only person that had figured out how to carry a sign on a bike. She had like rigged up this whole thing, this strap, and she wore it around her body. And since she was the only person that had a sign because no one else had figured it out, these creative youth, she said, Mom, everybody wanted to take a picture of me with my sign. And she said, well, at first I thought probably they only want to see this side, right? Like the blackness. And so she held up the sign with Angela Davis, and, you know, people thought it was beautiful. And she said, but Mom, the thing that really got me was everybody wanted to see the other side too. It was like they wanted to see all of me. So the part where she writes, I'm a Black, gay female, my life matters. And at that moment, I was like, yeah, that is what I want for my kids, right? For them to be fully seen. That's what I want for all the children, for them to be fully seen and for them to feel like they matter, right? All the parts of them matter. That's the goal. So this is a poem that was written by a 10-year-old boy. Again, it was right at the end of last school year. Low flying helicopters. I rush outside, look up, an amazing sight. You can see all the panels, the blades spinning like a saw, the jets thundering. They walk on air as we run on ground. The air that usually feels safe is now danger. Helicopters are amazing, but what they are flying to is not. Helicopters scaring peaceful protesters away. It is not right, not okay, for big, powerful machines to scare away the protesters. Most peaceful, some not. That's the reason the helicopters fly above. So low, so fast, so scary. And the thing about this poem that really got me, we were working on some poetry at the end of last year, is that these like thoughts about the helicopters that were really concrete for him, you know, like he loved these helicopters and they were so interesting, but the way he was thinking about them, what was going on inside, would not have been apparent to me just, you know, watching him watch the helicopters. And it just reminds me that there's so much inside our children that we may not know, right? It's really important for us to recognize that they can feel what's going on, right? Even if they don't know exactly what's going on, they can feel it. And so it's important to find ways to invite them into processing what's going on in the world. All right, so speaking of feelings, here's the feelings wheel. Feelings are really crucial in order for any of us to do any of this work. We need to be able to attach, I mean, a lot of it brings up a lot of feeling, a lot of emotion. And so we need to be able to name those feelings. And with young people, we need to help them with the feelings vocabulary. There are a lot of, young people that maybe stick with the core here: sad, mad, scared, peaceful, powerful, joyful. So those 6 like core feelings. And we'll see, I have memories of, I had a very tantruming 3-year-old, and you could see her go in a split second from a mad tantrum to a joyful moment, right? It's like very strong when you're young. There's not a whole lot of filtering of the emotions. And what I love about this wheel is the more abstract feeling words are kind of radiate out from the core feeling family. And so I use this in my classroom or something like it, just to kind of start to pinpoint our feelings and then understand where they're rooted, right? So if you take a look at this wheel and choose a feeling or 2 that just show kind of where you are. And oftentimes one of the things that I say to young people is, we can be having 2 real opposite feelings all at the same time. So kind of complicated. I'm going to change the chat to host only. And then if you wouldn't mind putting 1 or 2 feeling words, how are you feeling right now, in the chat. And then I'm going to read them out, but anonymously. So we'll just kind of get a sense of what's in the room without attaching it to any names. So take a moment, locate yourself on this wheel, and just go ahead and you'll chat directly to me. It's set up that way. Okay, and as the feelings come in, I'm just going to read them without names attached to them. I'm just going to read the words. Anxious, hurt, depressed, hopeful, confident, aware, tired and anxious, optimistic, sleepy, sleepy, thoughtful, anxious. Okay. So if we just kind of think about where we are, optimistic. You can see we're kind of all over the feelings wheel. And it's important to just to name that, and to also invite anybody, if there's anything that, any need that you think we could help you meet based on some of the feelings that are here, feel free to let us know. Like, you can let me know in the chat, and or feel free to just speak it out if there's anything. Oh, we've got excited added to the list. Great. All right. Thank you. All right. Quick silly question, but you don't see a gray square on the screen that's like moving around, do you? Okay, good. I was having a weird sharing issue a few days ago, but it was a different computer, and the like the shape of the chat box was like, you couldn't see the chat, but you could see like the shape moving around the screen. It was very strange. So here, this work, this anti-racist, work needs balance. And so as an individual, as a group, as an institution, there is a feeling level to this work, right, that needs to be addressed. We need to take care of the feelings. There are lots of feelings that come out of this work. At the same time, there's a thinking piece of it, right? There's like an intellectual piece of the work as well, right? Like I keep telling my 5th graders, the information, with more information about what's going on, like really understanding, the whys and asking questions, right, in our heads, the better, right? So there's a thinking piece of the work, and then there's the doing, and that's what Lisa was talking about earlier, right? Like the action. So how can I get to a place of action? So, and the reason these three balls are like this, is you need them all. It doesn't work if you just stay in the thinking space, which oftentimes white supremacy culture asks us to stay in the thinking space. It typically prioritizes thinking over feeling, right? So like your Fortune 500 company or whatever, right, is like, you know, probably not going to sit around and sing and hold hands. So there's like, but there needs to be balance, right? We need to understand that we have to name that there's feeling in this work, and then there's thinking, and then there's doing, there's action. And so today we are going to try to hit on those three aspects of anti-bias and anti-racist work. We're going to create the container, which again, I was really happy to hear that you have guidelines. It's really important to have guidelines in a community and to build and create common language so that everyone knows what we're talking about. So we'll do some of that. And then really it's this two-part piece. Like, we are the adults and we are raising the children, and who we are matters, and understanding myself matters. And I will never 100% understand myself, but I'm going to continue to work on understanding myself. And so I'm going to introduce you to an identity wheel. We're going to do a little identity home hunt. If you have any children with you, they may really enjoy this one. And then we'll do some work just understanding the development of racial consciousness. Like, when does that happen? And then the next piece is really the tools piece. So how can we as the adults, work on normalizing the noticing of difference with our children, understand and talk about oppression. I have a kind of metaphor of oppression like a seesaw. And what kinds of books and language we can use to lean on. And then we'll close with some reflections. And just know that I teach fifth graders, so I'm really used to like wiggly people or people that need to stand up. So like, you take care of your needs, and I have 2 built-in 10-15-minute breaks, depending on how time goes. But we will have some official breaks, but please take care of your needs. All right, so here come the guidelines. So these are my guidelines for anti-racist communication. They're a conglomeration of some different guidelines, pieces of different practices. Many of them come from Visions Inc., which is a really important group to know about. They've done a lot of training that I've been part of. And this one in particular is the one that they always start with. And I feel like you can't really do the work without this one. It's okay to disagree, no shame or blame of self or others. This one usually comes with some story. So for me, I'm an only child. My mother says that I've always been really agreeable. She was like, I didn't even have to parent you. You were so agreeable. So I don't believe her. I do believe that she parented me. And as the mother of 2 children, I know that one of them was a little easier to parent than the other, right? So that happens. And so that agreeableness, part of my nature, and there are other pieces of my identity that play into my agreeableness. So for me, this was a hard one to learn, that it's okay to disagree. In fact, it's actually really healthy to disagree, but disagreeing without shaming or blaming others or myself for the disagreement. So I want you to just think about your story around this one. Maybe this one comes easily to you and you know why. Maybe this one is one that you've had to grow into as well. But whatever your story is about it, if you would just take a moment, the chat is now open to everyone. So if you take a moment to just type your relationship to this guideline in the chat. How do you feel about this one? What's your relationship to this guideline? It's okay to disagree, no shame or blame of self or others. And while you're doing that, I gotta go grab something. Okay to disagree, no shame or blame of self or others. Great. And at this point, I always say, keep writing your novel. I love it. So that people pleaser part, right? Some of us have that. And if we've got that in us, we got it right. Learn to disagree and be vocal about it. And yes, we can disagree respectfully. What are others' stories? I learned that if the relationship is equal, then there is space. Otherwise, nope. It's really hard to be in disagreement if there's power plays, right? So at work, sometimes this can be really tricky. And so it's important to think about that. Like, what are your relationships, even on this screen? Or for example, the child-parent relationship, right? Where, that plays into whether or not you feel you can disagree. I'm also an only child, yes, Cecily, and Canadian. So I too have to actively work on that. I love the and Canadian part. That's great. I was a willful and independent child, so I'm okay with this. Big picture thinker, often see gray areas, look at things from every side. However, I hate conflict, so sometimes it's easier to stay quiet. But then I have all these debates in my head all the time, trying to find ways to disagree without upsetting people or myself. I hear ya. That sometimes it's hard to disagree as a woman and in groups. I hope you're noticing that people are naming parts of their identities as we go here, right? So we have age has been named, geographic location has been named, Canada, right? Birth place, right? Like our birth order has been named only child. Here we have gender identity, right? So all these parts play into how we navigate disagreement, right? Sometimes it's hard to disagree as a woman and in groups. I would agree with the power dynamic. Yeah, interesting point, Lisa, about seeing things from lots of different perspectives. That is a factor too. Spent my life being agreeable for safety. As I've grown up, I've become more vocal. Yeah. And then there's this piece of, right, like, when is it okay to disagree? Because it really may not be safe for me to do that. And so I like spending time with this one because it seems so simple. Like, yeah, it's okay to disagree. Just don't shame or blame yourself or anyone else, but it is not simple. And whenever there's disagreement, usually when you're in it, you're like, why is it so hard? Why can't this person understand where I'm coming from? But in fact, when I just think about the small group of people that we are right here, and the vast experiences that we have with this particular guideline, you can start to imagine how complicated it gets when you're talking about, a classroom of students, or your family and your family members, or your workplace, or trying to speak across differences. Okay. Also, shaming cannot be the intent of our words, but that may not be the impact. I think, and I'm really glad that intent and impact is coming up here, because it's another really important guideline that is coming up next. So thank you for that. Was that Ressa? Yeah. So yeah, being aware of intent and impact. With kids, this is how I do this one. You can't really tell, but I'm about 6 feet tall, little 5'11", and I'll walk around, the classroom and pretend to step on someone's foot, and I'll ask them, what would happen if I actually stepped on your foot? And they will name, well, it would probably hurt. Yes. Do you think your teacher would mean to step on your foot? No, right? That would not be my intent. And yet, does it still hurt? Yes, that's the impact. So is it my job to say, well, I didn't mean to, or I didn't do it, or, well, let me explain to you why? Or is it my job to tend to the impact of stepping on your foot? It is my job to tend to the impact of stepping on your foot. And once we can understand that physically, right? If I hurt you, it's just my job to take care of the hurt, like to listen to what do you need, so that I can really focus on the impact. What typically I know I tend to do, and many humans tend to go towards, well, really, this was my intent. And I want to explain away the impact by making sure that that I didn't mean it. Or maybe even, worst case scenario is like just saying, no, I didn't do it. So when it comes to emotional pain, this one's, it's real tricky. Raise your hand if you ever heard somebody say, or maybe they said to you, or maybe you've said, you're just being too sensitive. Being too sensitive. Have you ever heard that or said it yourself? Yeah. That's a someone tells you they're hurt, or you say you're hurt, and someone else is deciding for you how sensitive you are, right? Like, no, there was impact, and that's all I need to say about it. And so this particular one, I used to feel like I was really good at it. And then I had an incident where I hurt someone, and it became really clear to me. It's true. And I think Ressa said this, you don't always know if you've impacted someone, but it became clear to me almost immediately that I had done something hurtful. And I caught myself. All I wanted to do was explain it away. I wanted to say, well, really what I meant, and really how and luckily, again, because in the community, in the school community, I had some go-to people, and they said, remember the guidelines, Monique, like forget about your intent. It doesn't matter what you intended. Just stay with the impact. And all I need to hear were those words, stay with the impact. And I went to the person and I just said, tell me more, tell me about how you're feeling. And very quickly, that person told me they understood that that was not my intent. Like, all I needed to do was tend to the impact instead of worrying about myself. It really wasn't about me, right? It was really about them. So it's a big one. It's a big one, especially when you're in some kind of, you're like in a difficult conversation where you've hurt someone. What do you do? And I always just say, stay with the impact and keep asking questions about it. Oh, sorry. My chat was blocking my where are you really from? An example of a microaggression. Many people that have asked me that question, where are you really from? Well, right? Like, where are you really from? I'm 99.9% sure that the majority of people that have asked me that have not meant me any harm or any disrespect or anything. That's a microaggression that after I've heard it so many times, it makes me feel like I don't belong here, right? Like, what do you mean? Where am I from? I'm from right down the block in New York City, whatever. No, but where are you really from? My mother's German? Is that what you're looking for? So those kinds of moments where intent, it's really tricky. I was in a workshop once where one of the participants asked, well, what if you don't know what your impact is? And I think this is where, the more you care about a relationship, the more important it is to let folks know that impacted me. Like, that was hard for me because it's a learning. It helps take blinders away from folks that are just only seeing like this. So yeah, I almost forgot to name that. All right, this next little image, I share images like these with kids. Can someone just tell me what they see? Maybe Fiona can. Hey, Fiona.
Yes.
Hi, what do you see here in this picture? What is this? What are these two people doing?
They're thinking it's a 6 or a 9.
Yeah, and does it look like they are in agreement or disagreement?
Disagreement.
Uh-huh. This person thinks it's a what?
9.
And this person says it's a
6.
And why does this person think it's a 6 and this person think it's a 9?
The first person that's saying a 6 thinks it's a 6 and upside down 9.
Because of the way he's looking at it, right? And this person's looking at it this way. Does it look like a 9? Yeah. So it kind of depends how you look at it sometimes. And this kind of thinking, this guideline is both and thinking. And this is a little bit different from disagreement. I mean, it is kind of linked, but this has to do with really perspective and the way that I'm seeing something and the way that you're seeing something. The truth is real. It is really my truth. I really see it that way. It doesn't necessarily mean it's right, like it's not like who's right, who's wrong, but it's when I acknowledge that both your perspective and my perspective are really true for us, that shifts just the way that I'm thinking about our argument even, right? I'm like, oh, okay, you really think that's really true for you. It's different than, well, you're just wrong. So what this one does for me is it helps me remember that my experience is only my experience, and I cannot understand your experience fully because it's yours. So you have your own experience and I have to value that. And I love both and. It's kind of instead of either or, right? I love both and because it reminds me that I can have both internally, my own both and. I can be both really excited to be here and meet your community, and I can be looking out the window at the sunshine and thinking, wow, what a beautiful day. It's not either or, right? They're both true. So it can be an internal both and as well. So this is a really powerful one. And then these last two, maintain confidentiality and lean into discomfort, are really important. Maintaining confidentiality is just, when folks are telling their stories, those are their stories, and I treat them as a gift. And so it's not my job to share them with anyone else. And leaning into discomfort is when I invite myself to lean in and really, I'm only going to do that when I feel safe enough to do that. And so as the adults and as the teachers and, right, like as folks that are holding a space, when I'm holding a space, it's my job to make the space safe enough to be uncomfortable, right? And this is a big learning because there's a lot of fear, especially if we're in caring professions, about making people unhappy or uncomfortable. And that's true for me as a teacher. I can really see my growth around being really worried about like making a young person feel uncomfortable, and now understanding what kind of space I need to create to invite them into feeling uncomfortable, because our best learning happens when we're a little bit uncomfortable because we don't exactly know it yet. We don't exactly understand it yet. And that's true about math and reading and writing and all this stuff, but it's certainly true about anti-bias work. So leaning into discomfort and again, remembering that all of our identities are at play here. So for some of us, we're more often leaning into discomfort based on our identities. And this is not, there are moments, and I think maybe Ressa named it, where it may not feel safe to lean into discomfort. And so take care of yourself, right? Like, do not lean into discomfort if it doesn't feel safe enough to do so. All right. So first of all, are there any questions about any of these? And or, first, any questions about these? Are they all clear? Okay, good. So I am going to, ask Erin to drop that PDF that has the guidelines in it in the chat. And you should get it shortly. And I am going to make a little quick breakout room here and invite you into it. There are 2 or 3 people in it. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to make it this room with 3 or 4. Yeah. So there's 3 or 4 people in your breakout. And if you can, if you can engage in this conversation, talk about those guidelines and just talk about which one is resonating for you. Like which of them is one that you're like, yeah, that one. Either it's like really hard for you, or I don't know, it's just as we've been talking about them, it's resonating for you. You can also talk about which one you want to focus on today. And we'll be in those breakout rooms for just maybe 5 minutes. So if you don't know one another, I think you do, but if you don't, definitely do quick introductions before you start. Okay.
And I'm going to pause the recording for this breakout room.
Cool. And also, I'm going to open the rooms, and when I close them, it'll tell you there's a minute left. Stay in there for the minute and like enjoy each other's company, and then Zoom will bring you back automatically. So, I hope it felt good to just connect a little bit that way and think about those guidelines and just consider, what those could look like in your community. Again, it sounds like you have some guidelines set up, which are just awesome to have. And thinking about like what you can do, what you can add, what you can use in the tools you can use to create community in a community, right? So as I really, it doesn't happen so clearly in every group, but in today's, when you were giving feedback about, especially It's Okay to Disagree, it was really clear that pieces of our identities were very clearly part of the puzzle. And so, so this piece is really how well do I know myself, and how well do I need to know myself, and continue to know myself so that I can get this good work done. This is my mother. This was my mother when she was about 30. Love this picture of her. I am the daughter of my mother. She is a white German immigrant. She is strong and fierce and a fighter. She's also a child of war. She's a child of the enemy. Um, she was raised in times, where children were seen and not heard. She was raised in, with a lot of darkness around her in Nazi Germany. And it's very interesting to me to see how that shaped her and the way she thinks about herself. Um, my mother is 82 right now, and she is living with me. I just moved her in with me in Los Angeles. And it's, to bookend your life with growing up in Nazi Germany, and then this other bookend around what's going on right now, and the clarity of which you can see it all, like as it comes through the TV screen, and people are having these conversations around you. She's somehow managed to keep a brightness about her, even though it can be really heavy and hard. So I see like her brightness as part of me as well. And this is my father, my biological father, a Black man who my mother fell madly in love with. They, spent an incredible 5 years together. And she always says, I knew your daddy was not really meant to be a daddy, but I just fell in love with that man and thought if I was going to have a baby, any baby would be with that man. So that's part of my story. My mother raised me on her own. My father was in and out of my life, and every time he showed up, she would say, "Your daddy's here," and then I'd just go off with him. It was very like fine and kind of random, but he would show up, and that was that. He was a huge people person, and I can see that even though I did not grow up with him, there's some piece of his people personhood that I don't know, that's part of me. My Blackness is, from my father, and my whiteness is from my mother. And these are real pieces of me as well, right? Here's little me, and little biracial, multiracial me had no language for my biracial, multiracial self. Little biracial me was raised in the happy melting pot of colorblind America, with a hope and a dream that if only we could just not see the differences, it would all be okay. Clearly, this has not worked, right? And so, my mother spent, when I started doing this work, and really understanding myself more, my own journey, my mother spent some time like listening to me and thinking, why didn't I tell you? Why didn't I? I knew when you walked down the street, people would see you as a Black person. Why didn't I tell you that? And I was like, this is not a blame and shame situation, mommy. This is you raised me the way you raised me. And now I can take all pieces of me and apply those pieces to who I am today and how I'm raising my children. And there are definite differences. And then there are beautiful samenesses as well. So all these pieces of who we are, my only childness, my, New Yorker, growing up in the Big Apple-ness, my raising my own children here in Los Angeles, all these parts of me are important. And like I said, I didn't have words for my own racial identity when I was a child, and words matter. So this exploration of our own identities matters, because if I don't understand myself, if I can't talk about myself, then I cannot help my children talk about who they are. And like my daughter said, all of me, I want everybody around me to see all of the parts of me. And so, when she showed both sides of that sign, that was all of her. And so I've made that my mission, as both a parent and a teacher, to make sure that our children really feel fully seen and like they belong. So this identity wheel that you're looking at here, and I don't actually remember, Erin, did I did I make this? Did I share this one with you? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, yes, this is one of the files you shared with me. Do you want me to drop it in the chat
Did I
now?
call it number 2?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
I was that organized. Okay, yeah,
I'll drop it in the chat right now.
that's great. So this wheel, I just want to kind of talk you through it. It's created by me and lots of other people. I mean, this is my version of an identity wheel. I kind of mushed a bunch of different ones together. I think it's really, really important to understand that here around the outside is our humanity, because too many people have said to me, well, why are we talking about all these different differences? Like, shouldn't we just all be human? And that's that kind of colorblind approach. Like, shouldn't we just all talk about our humanness, things that make us the same? And I always say, well, please, let's talk about our humanity, because our humanity is the thing that's going to save us, right? Like, our humanity means we can all laugh and think and cry and feel and love, right? That's our humanity. Thank goodness for that. And other people have said to me, well, aren't we just individuals? And certainly, you know, the myth of meritocracy in America, and particularly, tells us we are individuals and we can change our fate and we can, you know, work hard and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and right. So this individuality, though it's overused in America and it's taken as I don't know, as a way to deny that other parts of our identities matter. I see it as part of who we are, of course. I also think of it as my personality. It's like the piece of me or the piece of my children that I can't quite touch. I don't know why these 2 children that I raised, my husband and I raised, are so different. Well, it's because of that center piece, right? It's their individuality, it's their personality, and that's real. So this is, I think, the biggest both and, right? My identity consists of my humanity, my individuality, and what's in the center here, my social identities. And what you see in these 8 bubbles, these, the National Association of Independent Schools, has taken these 8 identities and called them the 8 pillars. And I really like that visual of like these social identities are part of holding me up, right? They're part of me, who I am. And they're fully connected, you know, as we were telling our stories about the first guideline, gender came up, age came up, here, outside, geographic location came up, right? Our race and our ethnicity, our ability, all of these pieces of who I am are blended, are part of creating me as an individual. Outside of these 8 pillars, you then see appearance and activities and interests and family structure and education and citizen status and employment, right? All of these aspects of who I am, and I'm sure we could think of others, right? Matter, and they all are part of my individual identity. They're part of my multicultural identity, and it's fully inclusive. And what I love about this graphic is that it's a visual reminder that this is everyone's work and this is about everyone. So I know sometimes people will say like, oh, there's a diversity thing going or whatever, and people automatically think it's about Black people or it's about Black and brown people, or I don't know, I work in a private school on the west side of Los Angeles, and people say, well, how diverse is it? Right? That's the question I get. And, you know, what do we think they mean? How many Black and brown kids are there? Right? And that is important. That data is important, right? The racial identities of the students in my school and your school is important. And so are all the other pieces of identity that we have to pay attention to in order to, like my daughter, you know, is begging for, to be fully seen, all the parts of us. And so I love this because if there's anybody out there that thinks like, oh, this is other people's work, or this is about other people, or this is about like saving some people or something, it's not about that at all, right? This is about all of us. And it is about each of us understanding ourselves better so that we can help our children understand themselves better, so that they can understand other people better, so that we can make a better world to live in where people aren't hating on each other. And it's not like a blind, let's love everybody and like it'll all be good, right? It's like I have to understand how all of these identities are playing a part. So and all the identities are actually every day, if I'm at the gas station, if I'm in the store, if I'm at work, they're there. They're not, I don't get to turn them on and off. They're just part of who I am. And everyone has an age. The fact that I'm 52 right now, I walk really differently in the world with my 52-year-old self than I did with my 5-year-old self. right? My race, everyone has a race, right? When we talk about race, people think black and brown, but white people, right? That's a race. So we all, nobody's left out. Everybody's in, we're all in. Okay, and so with this, I'm gonna have us just think a little bit about our own identities and our homes. Now, I think everybody's in their home, but even if you're not, I always tell people like fish around in your pocket or in your bag or something. There's something around you that says something about you, something about your identity. So I'm going to give you, about, I don't know, 15 seconds I'm going to do it too. I'm just going to hop up and find something that says something about my identity. Like you've seen me drink this water bottle. I drink a lot of water. It says something about my identity. Okay. It could be as simple as that. It could be, I don't know, family photo, whatever it is. Find something that says, it could be my mother who just walked by. Find something that says something about your identity, and I'll see you back on the screen. Just hold it up as soon as you've got it. I'm going to stop the share. And yeah, if you're comfortable holding it into the screen, cool, do it. Take a little stretch break, 15 seconds, go find something.
15 seconds.
15 seconds. Oh, should I bring you back with me?
1, 2. You did it.
I did it. My mother did a countdown for me. Thanks so much. What would we do without them as parents? All right, love it. Now, if you are comfortable, if you're comfortable with me taking a screenshot of this, I would love to. If you are less comfortable with having your face in it, yeah, you can totally hide your face with your thing, or if you're willing to be seen, that's cool too. If you don't want to be seen, you can have camera off. All right, here we go. And Erin, I will totally share these with you. I love it. Oh my gosh. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so now, next breakout space for 5 minutes. You're going to go in that same room, share your objects, and say what they mean. You know, what do they say about you and your identity? Feel free to talk about any aspect of your identity that you want to. It'll be the same 5 minutes. You should feel at the end like, oh my gosh, I just got going on my biography. I've got so much more to share. Make sure you share the time equally. Everybody in there will have a little over a minute-ish, minute and a half, maybe. Okay, go. Can you put this in the chat? Which identities on the wheel did you hear about in your breakout space? Like I literally was in for just a few moments and I heard about geographic location. I heard about an identity around, I heard about an identity around being creative, about creative, artistic identity. So yeah, just drop in the chat what you heard, what parts of the folks' identities did you hear about? And feel free to put more than one, or if we have overlap, that's fine. And feel free to look at that PDF if it.
Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna.
At the wheel, yeah. Maybe it'll help if I go back to. What did you hear about? Wow. Right, so in 5 minutes, we talked about geographic location, family, history, ethnic identity, teacher identity, profession, passion, community, even dancers, family, history, roots, geography, right? Amazing. Family. What we can do in a mere 5 minutes together. Okay, I love it. And sexual orientation, awesome. Okay, 5 minutes. Oh no, sorry, 10 minutes. Goodness, 10 minutes, a real break. Go do what you need to do. And let's see, it is 4:19. Yeah, how about 4:30? Come back to the screen at 4:30. Don't go anywhere. We will press pause. I will stop this share for a second. And yeah, you can feel free to turn off your camera. I'll mute you all and we'll see you back at 4:30. Have a good break. All right, we are back. So, oh, here we go. So we are going to move from a coffee break to listening to the voice of a young friend of mine. He is 5 or 6 years old. I think 6 or just turned 6. And you just listen to him talk about his multicultural identity. And I'm not his teacher. His teacher asked him this question, and you'll hear his answer.
Multicultural identity is stuff that make you you, like my skin color. That's one of my outside identities, and my inside identity is my feelings.
Can you tell me something else about your family identity?
My family identity is that there are lots of things like the Indonesian, Ecuadorian, Filipino, and also American, and also Chinese.
So in the chat, just take a moment to think about the language that he uses and the pride that you see him, like, I love watching his body, right? Like, he's got a 5-6-year-old body. He's moving around, and he's describing his multicultural identity. So I want you to think about, and again, it may be, maybe if you ask your child that question, they'll be like, what's multicultural? Because you haven't talked about that word. But what would your children say about their identities and or the children that are around you, right? Sometimes I say to teachers, like, what do you think that the students that you teach would say? What would they answer? So go ahead and just throw it in the chat. Awesome. White, Canadian. My kids would say they're Cuban, American. She would say she's Hungarian and Dutch. American mutt. My child would say she's half Canadian, half American with ancestors from Europe. Cool. So now think about what you would say about your multicultural identity when you, French, American, Polish, when you were this age 6. What might you have said about your identity? And throw it in the chat. Great. All right. Thank you. The thing that I love about this clip is, it was taken in school, right? So you know that his teacher is talking to him about these things, and it's very clear that there's no way that his teacher could have given him those answers. So he needed to understand himself in order for this to work. So the partnership between home and school here is what I notice as a teacher and a parent. And I also noticed that he's a child of color, and typically children of color end up having more language. Typically, I didn't, but I was raised by a white mom. Typically more language to describe themselves, because again, typically we're the other, right? We're kind of othered, and our grown-ups typically know that they need to kind of instill this pride in us and who we are. Clearly, his grown-ups have taught him to be very, very proud of his identity. And so it's an interesting conversation, right? If your child is white, are you talking about whiteness? Are you talking about race? What parts of their ancestry are you talking with them about? And again, just the more that we can say about who we are, the better off we are. The more the more we're real, right? When there are words that we can use to describe ourselves, the more real we become. So I want you to think about this question. At what age do you think children start to notice race? Notice race. Not talking about racism, just at what age do you think children start to notice race? So just put what you think in the chat, then just a number. At what age do you think children start to notice race? It's not a test. Kind of a test. It's not a test. No grades.
It's funny though, because you know how you've like seen the charts, right? Where you're like, huh, yeah, what was that starting age?
Yeah. So we've got from 2 to 3 months, infancy, 1, 4, 2, toddlers. Okay, great. Nobody's saying high school here. So for sure, everyone here gets the, young children see race. Here's some research based information that I think is really interesting. That at birth, babies look equally at faces of all races. At 3 months, babies look more at faces that match the race of their caregivers. And then as young as 2, children are starting to use race to reason about other people's behaviors. That's interesting. And by 30 months, most children use race to choose playmates. So, right, like there's something that seems, again, we're creatures that are built to notice and to survive. We sort, we categorize, and we notice. We do that from a very young age. Okay, let's try this one. At what age do you think children start associating negative attributes with darker skin and positive attributes with lighter skin? And just throw those numbers in the chat. All right. Yeah, so we're in the like 2 to 3, right? Category around that time. All right. So yeah, this to me is what like pushes the work, right? When they're young. It's kind of like thinking about learning a language, right? Do it, start when they're young. So expressions of racial prejudice often peak at ages 4 and 5. And by 5, Black and Latinx children seem to show no preference toward their own groups compared with whites. White children at this age remain strongly biased in favor of whiteness. And then by kindergarten, so that I'm like, wow, kindergarten, children show many of the same racial attitudes that adults in our culture hold. They've already learned to associate some groups with higher status than others. And then by 5 to 7, when you have explicit conversations about interracial friendship, we can see that this can dramatically improve their racial attitudes. So the conversations that we have about the noticings are crucial. And who knows what typically happens when, let's say you're in the grocery store and your child points at somebody and says, "Why does that man have no leg?" Or, "How come that man's got dirty skin?" Or, what do we typically do when our young children ask these questions and make these noticings? Can you just unmute and do it?
Tell them it's rude to point and talk about people.
Yes, right. And sometimes we might even like, shh, like let's move away from the person with the no leg so they can, right? Like there's this, shame that I think the adult can feel, and fear, and a bunch of other feelings, again, back to that feelings wheel, that we need to grapple with and we need to figure out so that we can have the responses that we need to have in order to to help our young children with their noticings. Because I don't know how many of you are familiar with this book, but the Anti-Bias Education book for young children and ourselves. Louise German Sparks was the writer. I think this was probably first published in the 80s. This is the second edition. It's really wonderful. The part that I want to read a little bit to you that I love is this little paragraph called "The Hurtful Power of Silence." It's hoped that children will turn to their trusted adults when they're confused or hurt by their experiences, but to do so, children need a vocabulary to describe what they're thinking. Too often, adults ignore children's attempts to understand how people can be different from one another and yet the same. A white child asking about skin color is likely to hear something like, "We're all the same. We're all friends here." That child is left to figure out for herself why the people around her look different from one another, and with insufficient information may well decide that dark skin means dirty skin, or that different skin colors mean different kinds of blood or different personalities. Equally significant, if adults go silent about things that children are seeing and trying to understand, children absorb emotional messages about that the subject is dangerous and should not be talked about. This leaves children with an undercurrent of anxiety and unease, which are the earliest lessons about bias and fear. And that really stuck with me, right? Like, because what I've often heard is, right, like, well, we don't want to ruin their innocence. Like, we don't want to talk about those things because they don't even really notice, or, right, there's this fear of ruining the innocence. Whereas actually what we're doing is we're putting our own baggage on the small child who's just noticing a difference, but we're giving it some value judgment. And then we're taking our fears and our anxieties and we're just putting them right onto the kids. So it's like we're doing the opposite of what we're trying to do. Silence is a powerful teacher. What you don't say carries messages that are as strong as what you do say. Regardless of your intent, and here we go with intent and impact, your unwillingness to openly talk with a child about the world sends serious, strong, and potentially hurtful messages. Consider, and then there are these 4. Silence robs children of a vocabulary to talk about or to ask questions about what is confusing or troubling to them. Silence requires children to figure things out on their own, using their own limited understanding of the world. Silence teaches fear. The subject is so unsafe, even adults won't talk about it. And silence forces children to rely on sources such as other children, another 4-year-old in the carpool, the 6-year-old next door, a 10-year-old cousin, and the media, TV, advertising, videos for information, including how they should feel and think about what's happening in the world. These are major sources of inaccurate and often stereotyped information. And it goes on, but there's just so much in there that that is just begging us to start young. And an incredible educator, Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. She's a writer. If you haven't read Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting in the Cafeteria? It's a longer title than that. It's a beautiful book. Dr. Tatum names these sources of resistance to talking and learning about race. She did some research in her primarily white college classrooms and found that these were the kind of 3 main reasons why white people typically don't talk about race. Race is considered a taboo topic for discussion, especially in racially mixed settings. And again, those messages of silence, right? Like we're just taught without words that we don't talk about it, right? And I'm saying I'm catching myself. If I'm raised in white America or by a white person, typically am taught that that's a taboo topic without those words coming out of the adult's mouth necessarily, right? Many students, regardless of racial group membership, have been socialized to think of the United States as a just society. And again, this like myth of meritocracy forces us to think, well, but this is a fair place, right? Like this is the great United States, you know, how can, it doesn't make sense in my mind. And so I'm resistant to talking about whiteness. And then this piece, many students, particularly white students, initially deny any personal prejudice, recognizing the impact of racism on other people's lives, but failing to acknowledge its impact on their own, right? So it's like, oh yeah, I'll help those people who are having difficulty, right? Because of this thing called racism, but for me as a white person, I don't really have anything to do with it, right? Like it's not me, it's just like about those people and helping those people, yes. So it's really interesting the way that in America, and this is where we're basing our work right now, the socialization of the dominant culture, it just seeps in. And so it's like Dr. Tatum talks about racism as a smog. And so it's like the smog, right? We wouldn't just say, oh yeah, go ahead out there and, you know, breathe it. I mean, when there were those fires, we all did, you know, whatever we could to keep ourselves as safe as we could, you know. We were trying to attend to what was in the air. And so it's like a consistent tending to what's in the air. All right, so I love this little video. It's about 5 minutes long, and it comes out of MTV has done this series of videos that I highly recommend you checking out. This one is centered around the question, when did you first realize your race? And so again, in the spirit of all of us adults really understanding our own racial identity so that we can actually talk openly about racial identity with our children. Think about your own racial identity as you hear these stories of these adults who are looking back at their childhood and they're thinking about when they first realized their race. In this video, there are, I think, all of the people are people of color talking about their realization, except for one white woman. And it's really interesting. Again, if you identify as white, think about your story, and was your story about recognizing your own race? Did it come from you noticing someone else's race, right? Someone else's difference? And as a person of color, if you identify as a person of color, did your recognition of your own race or was your racial identity called out or named, right? Did it come at you, or right? So like the story itself of realizing your own race is very personal to where you sit around whether or not you are part of dominant culture or a targeted group. All right, here we go. Give me a thumbs up when you can hear the voice.
When did I realize my race?
I'd say I was about 12 years old.
I was 10 years old. I was about 14.
So I was 6 years old, first grade, and a girl in my class was having a yard sale, but she said that I could not come because her mother told her that black people steal a lot. I was honestly just really confused because I didn't really understand why I couldn't go. Like, what does black people stealing have to do with me?
I grew up in Puerto Rico, so like race really wasn't a thing because we are the race. So you'd see people and be like, oh, that's a black Puerto Rican, that's a white Puerto Rican, that's a Dominican Puerto Rican. I didn't really get race till I was the only Hispanic who joined an all-white fraternity. And even then, it still didn't hit me till we would go and visit the other chapters. Like we'd walk in and be like, are you did you know they had that? They all had the same jokes. Like it was always like, oh, we need a metal detector now. I bet the house is clean. Oh, here comes Sticky Fingers. The dumb thing is, the jokes I heard when I was 17, I still hear now and I'm 30. Just different frat guys.
I was in middle school and I was having lunch with friends, and a kid called across the courtyard, hey Reka, where did you get your shoes from? Kmart? Because you're poor? Because you're from India? We were 10, so this is basically my first experience with the building blocks of a racist argument. His logic is, I'm Indian, therefore I must be poor, therefore I must buy cheap shoes? Is that a future Trump supporter?
When I was 12 years old, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, you know, with a little Spanish, a little black family sprinkled in. One time, went to my neighbor's house, and we found a trapped squirrel in a cage. What did we do? Man, we freed that squirrel. You gotta free the squirrels, baby. I get home, then there's a knock on my door. It's animal control and the neighbors, and they want to tell my mom about what happened. My mom, she sits me down. She says, I know it was you and your friends, but you have to be careful because people are gonna treat you differently. I've never felt like that before, where I knew I was in trouble and my mom didn't like ground me for it. She taught me a lesson. That is a mind.
So I was going to this new church where I was surrounded by kids my own age for the first time, and they all, you know, were super nice, but it was the jokes that really like hit me the hardest. Suddenly they were, you know, pulling their eyes back to imitate mine or speaking to me in like broken English. None of the jokes were even good. My eyes are great.
I was about 14, living in South Louisiana, and it was early one morning, I wanted to go catfishing. So you gotta get in this little boat, it's smaller than a canoe, and you gotta go way out. So I'm getting my friends together, and my one friend who's black, she said no. And I was like, why not? Come on, it's fun, it's danger. And she was like, I'm black. I'm not gonna go seek out danger. That happens to me all the time. Oh. Yeah.
So I was born in Canada, and when I was about 5 years old, my family moved to the US, and before I could enroll in my public elementary school, they made me take this test, which I thought was like a fun test that every kid had to take. And then I talked to my parents about it, and they were pissed because it was a test for ESOL, which is English for Speakers of Other Languages. I'm from Canada, not China. Never China. So I passed that test.
I went to a small private middle school with about 65 kids, mostly black and Hispanic. And every Friday they had a speaker series. And one time, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman came in to speak to us. And my classmate said to her, you have very beautiful eyes. And my principal corrected her and said, no, you have beautiful eyes. It made me kind of understand that The mark of beauty isn't whiteness, it's how you feel about yourself. That moment made me feel proud to be black.
If I could go back in time, I'd tell my younger self to with them more, to pass that ESOL test with flying colors, and then show up only speaking Chinese.
First thing I'd say is don't get in that boat, Amber, okay? It's gonna fall over and it's gonna be really scary. And the second thing I'd say to my friend is, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Honestly, I don't know what I would do. Like, part of me thinks I would tell the teacher, but like, what's she supposed to do? You can't force that girl's mom to not be a racist.
It's weird because I don't know what I would have told my 12-year-old self. I think that it's good that that happened, because if I didn't get that lesson then, I could have gotten that lesson in a way different, deadlier way. So I'd rather be about some rabbit squirrels.
12-year-old Joel, just practice your smile for every time a white person thinks they're saying something super clever about your race. You know, just like that.
Don't worry, your shoes were awesome.
All right. Yeah, so those stories, and one of the things that really stands out to me when I listen to those is like not only the age, they were all kind of younger, elementary school. I think the white girl was older when she had her experience. But the jokes, you know, he talks about in the very opening, the jokes that he heard in college were the same ones he heard in, you know, elementary school. And sometimes people wonder about middle school, like why, like there's a lot of racist stuff starts to flare, like they said that racist joke or whatever. And to me, it feels really obvious. It feels like, you know, we spent all this time trying to teach our kids to not notice what's really obvious around them, that people are different. And then we are surprised when stuff comes back at us, and, you know, all kinds of misperceptions and all kinds of like figuring out. Kids are it reminds me of like not wanting to teach kids about sex or something, right? Like if you don't teach them, they're gonna find it out some other way, and it's probably gonna be wrong, right? Like, so there's this and there's this desperation to understand one another, you know. So I'm thinking right now, just kind of in your own mind, and we might be in a breakout room later that in the stories might come up, but in your own mind, just try to locate when you first realized your race. When you were really, really little, it might be something that you can't take apart, like you always knew your race. Or it might be something that was an incident that happened later in life. So just see if you can locate it. And then let's just use the chat to see if you can throw an age in the chat. Just the age. When did you first realize your race? And again, if it feels like I've always known my race, you know, then maybe it's age 1 or something. Putting mine in too. So we've got 8, 10, 4, 4, 5, 6, 5. Right. And so again, thinking about parenting our children, 6, thinking about teaching our children, right? This is the time, right? Not to wait till they're older, so that they have somewhere to put it, right? They can understand themselves. They can be on their journey earlier. I say, like, I'm on my journey, my racial identity journey, and it started. I mean, I was on my journey the whole time, but I was clueless about my journey until really I hit college. That's college for me, is when I really started to understand or begin to understand my own racial identity. That's too late, you know? All right. So, you know, what does this mean? And I love this quote by Howard Zinn. You can't be neutral on a moving train. And it's like that smog. It's all around us. It's not like we can choose to not breathe it in. And so the train of racism is moving. And if I decide to be neutral, I'm not really, because I'm just going right along with it. Another great metaphor that another white anti-racist educator used, I'm forgetting his name right now, I forget his name, but I loved it. It's a metaphor of the escalator. Like when you get on the escalator, racism is the escalator and it's just taking you, or a people mover at the airport, you know, it's just taking you along. You don't have to do anything. You can just be standing there and be part of the racist system. The only way to actually, you know, go do something different is it takes work, right? So I love, raise your hand if you've ever tried to go the other way on an escalator, on a moving escalator, like it's going up and you try to go down. All the rebels in the room. Yeah. So trying to get down a moving escalator going up it takes effort. And so I really like that, that metaphor of thinking about if I'm not doing anything, then I am participating in the system of racism. Can't be neutral on a moving train. So how can we not be neutral? How can we help our young people understand power and privilege in a developmentally appropriate way? Here you're going to meet Leora. She's one of those kids that I always say, like, you could have given her a paper bag. Be like, we're going to study this paper bag for about a week, and she would be excited. She would be like, yes, there's something exciting about this paper bag. She was one of those kids. She's in 6th grade now. This is Leora last year in 5th grade. She's 10. And after a lesson on thinking about oppression like a seesaw, she wouldn't leave the classroom, and she stayed, and she was like, Monique, can I stay through snack? I have an idea. And I said, sure. So she and I talked, and she said, I think, and you can see behind her the list that we generated. This was just a list, me asking 5th graders, you know, what is it that makes us similar and what is it that makes us different? And I've asked that question from kindergarten on up. And the children can make the identity wheel. You know, they will name all the ways we are similar and different. They won't miss one. In 5th grade, I was giving them some of the language for, like, they said, you know, like where you live. And I was like, right, that's like geography. That's our geographic location, right? So you can see the brainstormed list behind us that the kids came up with. And then when we talked about the history, and again, these are 10-year-olds, so now they can understand history. For them is still sometimes like last week, you know, they're still working on, right, really long ago and far away, still a stretch. There are a lot of really concrete, 10-year-olds, but they're ready for sure to start thinking about what came before. And if you ask them, we looked at this list, and, you know, I said, so let's take gender, our gender identity. So if you were to think about what you know about, you know, just in the binary of male and female identities, which of those identities do you think historically has held more power, and which do you think has been pushed down? They're like, well, women, girls, of course, right? Like they just instinctively, I didn't have to teach them that, they knew that, right? And so as we started thinking about what that means, right? That did not mean that all the boys identified kids in the class were mean, horrible people, because it's not about individuals, right? I learned that racism was about individual acts of meanness, but in fact, racism is systemic. So was sexism, so was ableism, right? Like it's not about, if it was just about a couple of mean people, it'd be really easy to fix. And so when the 10-year-old started understanding that, we started talking about this seesaw, like when one group gets pushed down and the other gets lifted up. So Leora said, I think it would be really cool if we made a chart where we could name, you know, historically empowered or privileged identities and historically oppressed identities, and then we could identify ourselves. We could do it, you know, privately or publicly, whatever we're comfortable with. I was like, that's a great idea, Leora. So she stayed and she made this chart. So just listen to her talk, and then we'll give you your own copy.
I'm Leora, and in our classroom we were talking about groups of historically oppressed and historically empowered people. We use Texas to represent groups of historically empowered people, and O's to represent groups of historically oppressed people. We talked about how oppression was like a seesaw, and how as the groups of oppressed people got pushed down, the groups of empowered people would rise up. We brainstormed a list of groups of people on either side of the seesaw and found it interesting how we saw parts of our identity on either side.
What did you think we could do with that list?
I thought it might be cool if we could chart it to show our identities. Say maybe if you, should I do mine?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I would do, I identify as left-handed, so I would go like that. I'm Jewish, and then I speak English, like that. I think it's much easier to focus on your O's because there's nothing wrong with that, but generally the people on the sides of the X column in history have oppressed the people on the O column. So I think it's much easier to think about and maybe be a little angry about your identity on the O side, whereas on the X you can feel a lot of guilt for what people in that same identity have done to those on the O side in the past. Doing this exercise can help you be more aware of the parts of your identity that are in the X column and those that are in the O column. So pick up a pencil and start charting your identity.
Okay, so she's given you marching orders, and Erin's going to drop that in the chat. Sorry, every time I do this, it worked. Usually it plays again. So Erin, if you drop, I think it's number 3, it should be just a copy of this, of what Leora made. And just know that it's not exhaustive. I mean, right there, we could add identities to this, but this was kid made, all of 5th grade. And just the reason why the right-handed and left or mixed-handed is up at the top is because, and this is a great way to talk about historic oppression, especially if you have a lefty, if you're raising a lefty. Are any of you left-handed here? No, right? No? Okay, because again, right, like here we go. Like, so we're all identifying as right-handed. And we can look at the history and understand that, in the past, and we can see what's happened today, right? It's no longer, I don't know any places that are hitting lefties with rulers and tying their hands behind their back, but that was a thing, right? And the lefties today will tell you it is not convenient to be a lefty, and the world is set up for righties. Leora, as a lefty, was very passionate about this, and we met in affinity space around our left, right, or mixed-handed identities. And it was amazing because I sat with right-handed kids, with like 10-year-olds, 7, 10-year-olds who identified as right-handed. And there was this one white boy who, totally, he was a perfect model of the blinders that we put on when we think that we are just the norm, right? So he said, what is this right-handedness stuff about our identity? This is nothing. This is ridiculous. This is not part of my identity. I'm not, whatever, right-handedness. I was like, what does it matter? I was like, great, let's write that down. Like, we were writing down everything that we were feeling about our identity. And so when we shared that out, Leora and her group of lefties was like, it is a thing. You don't know it's a thing because everything's set up for you. And she went, the group listed all the difficulties of being a lefty, right? All the challenges. And they listed some of the perks, right? Like in sports, there's some perks there. You can really throw somebody's game if you're like a lefty tennis player or something, right? But it was a great way into talking about the history of oppression and how easy it is to not see something if it doesn't impact you. And it doesn't mean you're bad. It just means like you haven't seen it yet. And so so that's how we used this chart. So I just kind of want you to think about like who we are and what perspectives we're bringing, and then also where we might have blinders on. And so if you can, I don't expect that you've printed this out and, you can't do it the way Leora imagined it, which was, circling each dot and drawing your little zigzag or not zigzag, between the identities. But if you just kind of look at it and think about where you land and, or, jot down some notes or whatever you want to do, what are some of your thoughts or your ahas? Oh, and thanks, Lisa. I didn't see that. Um, so what are some of your thoughts about yourself and your own identity as it relates to historic empowerment or privilege, right? And or oppression, historic oppression. Again, like I explain this to the kids, like, okay, so I circle, female. It doesn't mean that I literally feel oppressed every moment of my life. That's not what this is about. And it certainly doesn't mean that I think my husband's a big mean guy, right? What this means is I'm carrying with me the history of oppression that comes with my identity as a woman, right? And that means something. It plays out in our lives. So, okay, I'll give you a second to just think about yourself. And then if you're willing to throw in the chat any noticings, ahas, realizations, anything, please do. What does it make you think about? And or feel free to throw in the chat anything that you're thinking about, Leora's explanation. Yeah, Leora. It's with an I. Right, so noticing, right, like where are your X's and where are your O's? The story behind the X's and O's is a whole nother lesson that I'll someday maybe can explain to you. But yes, we started just naming them, the X's and O's of oppression. Yeah, where is it? Like, are you balanced? Are you, yeah, she was right. That was so astute. Like, it's so right. She was like, it's easier to see, right, the places that we're oppressed and to feel angry about it, right? And it's okay, like, to feel angry about it. And she named guilt with X identities, which was big, right? It's oftentimes why I don't want to see those, because I don't like that feeling, And in white identity development, guilt is the first step, right? Towards, I mean, what happens oftentimes is people get to the guilt phase, like stage 1, and then they check out. They're like, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do this. And if we can acknowledge, again, like feelings of guilt are normal to have. When I notice my ableist perspective, when I'm aware of it, I can sit around and just feel guilty about it, that I think of everything the way, a temporarily able-bodied person thinks of things. Or I could, acknowledge my guilt, and then I could move on and think about, okay, now what, right? Like, now what am I going to do about that noticing? All right. I have a really cute slide. I'm skipping this one. Oh, I have another really cute break slide, so I had to show it, but I'm going to stop the share. And just before we take another 10-minute break, when we come back, it'll be, 5:25. We'll have our last moments together. But just before we go and stretch ourselves, is there anything anybody wanted to ask, or anybody was thinking about that exercise, or any thoughts or questions? Yeah.
I thought how in terms of geography, where one would have been in the X and the other one is an O.
What do you mean as part of your own identity?
As part of my identity, where it was like around language.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, it's interesting too. You could think of geographic location in lots of different ways. For example, if you think of like America, right? Like where, right? And you're like, okay, well, right, I'm part of like an empowered group of people. And at the same time, I live in a Black and brown neighborhood, right? So, right. So there is that. That's really interesting.
I was thinking the example I was thinking about was like where, as an English speaker, that's definitely clear, right? An X. But then as a Spanish speaker, that I know because we're native, right? That Spanish is the dominant language in Latin America, not the Zapotec that we would speak. And so I know that one has, but yet here in the US, being a native Spanish speaker, it would be in the O.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I love that too. Like the noticing that actually where you position yourself, like some of these identities change, right? Like, and this particular model is built on kind of like the USA, like thinking about it that way. And I love the opportunity to think outside of that. And what does it mean when we shift outside of the US? What changes? Really cool.
It actually made me remember something because atheism was on the O side. And my parents religion was just not mentioned in our house. It just wasn't a thing. My parents are both agnostic, but it just wasn't a thing. But I went to like summer Bible camp because it was free and they just sent you there. But my grandmother, my mother's mother, is a very outspoken atheist. And I would spend some summers and vacations with her. And I think I had just spent the summer with her before 5th grade, and I was in a Girl Scout troop. And I mentioned at this Girl Scout meeting that I didn't believe in God. And our troop leader was this huge Christian and, started crying. And I left the troop. That was like my last, she didn't kick me out, but I did not feel comfortable returning. And at the time, like, I just kind of laughed about it and thought, well, I wouldn't want to be in that troop anyway. But now as a mom thinking about it, like, yeah, it's just funny, how I never really thought about that moment for a long time.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Our belief systems and again, the way we're raised, and then also the way then we then choose to raise our own children. Like there's a lot there to unpack and think about. And it's interesting too, because of intersectionality and the way that our identities, connect, it can add to complications with understanding where you hold power and where you don't. So, like there's big work for, I know I have 2 friends who are white and Jewish. One identifies as female, one identifies as male. And both of them are white anti-racist leaders in this work. And a lot of their work is around helping other Jewish people understand that their Judaism and their Jewish identity, which is right in the historically oppressed column, yes, like stays there, and their whiteness is in the historically, privileged column and stays there, and they do work together, because it's easy to kind of like want to cancel out one, like, well, I'm not really white because because I'm this, or I'm not really because I'm that. So it's just interesting how all of the identities, I love this chart and this exercise because it helps me understand where I'm holding power. Because like Leora said, sometimes the O identities, like I'm constantly reminded of them, or they come hit me in the face, and so sometimes I forget where I'm holding power, so it's a good exercise, no matter where you fall or how zigzaggy your line is or not, or whatever. It's an interesting way to think about power and privilege. All right. Okay, so it's 17 after. Let's do 5:30, and then we'll have our last half hour all refreshed. So see what you can get done in the next, whatever that is, 13 minutes. Sound good?
And can we end on this note? I would have loved to have been in your 5th grade class, right?
Aww.
And when you talk about the what now, friends, we can do this. You know what I'm saying? Having these conversations and these activities and stuff. So I just want to thank you, because it feels like the what now.
Yes. Yay. That's good. Good news. All right. Thank you. See you in a few. We've been with one another for a while. I brushed my dog. What do people do?
I talked to one of our wonderful 5th grade teachers on the phone and said, I'm going to leave this document for you on my front step. And so I'm looking for that right now.
Cool. What else? What else? What do people do?
I got some peanuts.
Oh,
ooh, you got some what?
Peanuts.
Yum. Shells or unshelled?
I put Planters peanuts in this Tiffany candy dish that I was given 30 years ago as an engagement gift for a wedding that we canceled.
Oh, that's good. That's a good story.
But I still have this dish.
Love it. Peanuts out of a beautiful dish.
My husband, or rather my son, brought me a hot plate of food from El Cochinito, our favorite restaurant. That,
wow.
Yeah, they got takeout and they heated up a plate of it for me. So I just got to scarf down a plate of black beans and rice and lechon asado, and I feel very lucky.
Very lucky. Love it.
I really miss El Cochinito.
Where is that?
On Sunset in Silver Lake.
Mm.
Yeah.
When you say you miss,
I'm so sorry. We're gonna have to ship it to you in Arizona.
I know.
Where are you?
I'm in Tucson, Arizona. We moved here about a week after the school campuses closed last year, because we lived in a high-rise in downtown LA, and our daughter already absolutely hated living in downtown LA and had refused to walk outside for probably over a year at that point. And so we realized that
it was time.
Yeah, we had been promising her we would move for a couple of years, but we had we were grandfathered into affordable housing there, and we loved her school. We didn't want to move an hour away where we couldn't find anything. And all it took was a global pandemic to make us finally leave downtown LA.
Yeah, it gave a lot of us a kick in the pants, a lot of different kinds of kicks in the pants. Oh, man. Well, here we are in our last 26 minutes together. And we're just going to end with this question, right? Like, how can we lean into conversations about difference with our children? Right. Hopefully, if we've taken nothing else away, we know that, we need to find ways in. And so books can be tools. I loved books. I'm, only child. I spent my whole summer reading, but wow, do I wish there had been the selection of books to read that there are now, right? Our young people have there's so many good options, which it always drives me a little crazy that I think, again, the pandemic also pushed us into creativity mode, a lot of us. And so I know it did that for me. And yet there's still some people that I think get really stuck in their ways, like teachers that I know that have read the same book over and over for a million years. I'm like, why? I mean, I get it. I have favorite books too, but there are great books out there from all different perspectives. And then it's that language piece, like how can we not be silent and how can we respond in ways that that we invite the questions. And so we're going to do some quick little practice of that. It's going to be just a little taste. And what I always say, it doesn't matter how long the workshop or if it's a multiple series or whatever, it is just the beginning. And it's at the end of any diversity, equity, belonging workshop, you should feel like you're at the beginning, because if you feel like you're at the end, then something's wrong. So here are just a few of my favorites. I'm curious about this one. This is my favorite book to use to talk about skin color. All the colors we are, the story of how we get our skin color. It is in Spanish and English. Raise your hand if you know it. If you know this book. Yay. Yeah, it's beautiful. I have it here and I'm gonna ask, hold on, let me see if I can make this work. Oh, I know what I need to do. Okay, let's see if this is gonna work for me. Okay, tell me if you can see this. Yeah, can you see it? All right, do I have a volunteer that would like to read the Spanish after I read the English? Anybody? We won't read the whole book. We're gonna read a couple pages.
Alejandra, do you want to volunteer or should I do it?
Oh, I was saying yes. Yes.
Oh, you were saying yes, I couldn't see you.
Awesome. Okay. People have many different colors of skin. Even though we often say the words, he is black or she is white, all of us have skin that is a different shade of brown.
La piel de las personas es de muchos colores diferentes. Aunque a veces decidimos ella es negra o él es blanco, todos tenemos color de piel de un matiz entre el color tostado y castaño.
Great. What color is your skin? What name would you like to give the color of your skin?
¿De qué color es tu piel? ¿Qué nombre le darías al color de tu piel?
How do you think we get our own special color of skin? Make a guess.
¿Por qué crees que tenemos ese color en la piel? ¿Tienes alguna idea?
We get our skin color in 3 different ways. And here's the kicker, right? 3 different ways.
Tenemos ese color en la piel por 3 razones distintas.
From our parents and from our relatives who lived long ago called ancestors. And I always stop here and say, this is our biological ancestor. We don't always all know, right? If we were raised in a family that's formed by adoption, we may not know who our ancestors are, but those ancestors are part of our skin color.
Por nuestros padres y por unos familiares que vivieron hace muchísimo tiempo llamados antepasados.
From the sun.
Por el sol.
And from something called melanin.
Y por algo llamado melanina.
Melanin is tiny grains of coloring in our skin. We can't see the tiny melanin grains, but we all have melanin in our skin.
En nuestra piel existen pequeñísimos granos de un colorante llamado melanina. Los granitos de melanina no se pueden ver a simple vista, pero toda la gente tiene melanina en la piel.
If you have dark skin, the melanin in your body is very active. If you have light skin, the melanin in your body is not very busy.
Si tu piel es oscura, es porque la melanina de tu cuerpo es muy activa. Si tu piel es clara, es porque la melanina de tu cuerpo no es muy activa.
Thank you so much. And it continues. I love that book so much. I remember having the conversation about melanin with Moreau when she was about 3 in preschool, my daughter. And I will never forget her in her car seat, looking out the window and pointing at people and saying, he has more melanin than me. She has less melanin than me. And she was just noticing, and right, the differences and the noticing was normal, right? Because she knew about melanin. She had some language, she had some vocabulary, and she understood that people are all different. Some of us have more melanin, some of us have less melanin, or some of us have melanin that's like less active in our skin. That book, along with so many books that help us to really understand our identities and help us to celebrate who we are crucial. I just literally pulled some of the books that I have on my bookshelf. People always ask like, oh, do you have a book list? Yeah, not really. It keeps changing. I don't know. I just keep finding great books. It's not hard nowadays. But these kinds of books that say, you know, you matter, right? And then, oh, I love this one too. This one is fairly new by Sonia Sotomayor. Do you know this? Just Ask. Oh, I love it. Just again, normalizing the like, yeah, I'm noticing that's different about you. And like, yeah, just ask, right? Kind of weaves like a poem. And then from there, moving to books like this is more like 4th, 5th grade level, but I love this collection of poems, Can I Touch Your Hair, that it talks about microaggressions, but it does so in the building of a friendship, a cross-race friendship between a boy-identified African-American kid and a girl-identified white girl, and they are partnered together to write a poem, and they learn so much about each other. It's really, and it's all written in verse. It's really beautiful. And then the books like this, this was just, I think just came out this summer, Dictionary for a Better World. It's by the same authors as the people that wrote this. And I love this one. It's got action. It's like full of action. like this page. We use this in AYC, in the Anti-Racist Youth Coalition. So this is like create, and it tells you like what to do. Gather paint and brush, lift guitar and strum, make something in a mad rush. And it talks about like, try it today, make something new. It could be a song, a poem. I don't know. I love this book. And then, this book, has anybody seen this one? Not My Idea. I love this. Not My Idea, a book about whiteness, written and illustrated by Anastasia Higginbottom. This book, again, it's not like, first of all, I make sure that you read every book that you read your kids first before you just launch into reading it. This is really powerful because it's from the perspective of a little white girl who has a sense that something's going on that people aren't talking about, right? And so this is very timely. This came out probably also maybe a year or two ago. I don't know, maybe a little bit more. But it talks about, from her perspective, the little bits of like information about the world that she's getting and about race and racism, and that nobody's talking to her about. And she gets mad. And she's like, how come you're not telling me? There's something going on. So this is really a powerful one. So just again, like a book plug. Don't forget how powerful, how wonderful they are. And then, okay, I think this is, yes. All right, so the next thing that Erin's going to drop in the chat is a document that has some like tips on it for leaning into conversations about difference. Those conversations we were talking about that sometimes we shush or we want to run away from. And these are the kind of main points, but they're fleshed out in that handout. So the idea of like paring down the issues. Sometimes we adults get overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, what are they asking about? But actually, and I added ask questions, because sometimes if we ask our children questions, they will tell us what it is they really want to know. And instead of us getting overwhelmed by what we think they want to know, or what they think, what we think they're noticing or talking about. I love this one, acknowledging the difference between public and private spaces, that it's important to address an issue in a public space, and it's real, that it can be, it can be really hard to address a difficult topic when the whole store is staring at you, or it feels like that. So you can acknowledge with your child the difference between being in a public space and a private space. And, if there's something that your child is saying or noticing, and you need to respond to it, right, in the public space, but you don't have to give them you don't have to have the whole conversation in the public space. You can invite them into, let's talk more about that when we get home. Like, that's a great question. Naming and noticing difference and affirming, right, questions and comments about difference instead of shoving them aside. And this one's, really important. I used to say we were like stereotype challengers. So when we would watch TV or see something that made me feel uncomfortable, like, ooh, it looks like that's a message that is saying, this about all people, whatever, I would say that makes me uncomfortable. Like, this is the way that I see it. And I would name that out loud. This is maybe my favorite. Naming patterns, not rules. So challenging stereotypes. So, all boys have short hair. It looks like, right, like your children, you want to name that they're noticing a pattern. Are you noticing that a lot of boys have short hair? Oh, okay, that's a pattern, but it's not a rule, right? There are lots of girls with short hair too. Let's look for them. Let's notice them, right? So naming patterns, not rules. And then really, again, using that feelings vocabulary, considering feelings, talking about the concept of fairness, which, by the way, our youngest children are really good at talking about, right? That's not fair. I'm sure you've heard that before. And then just using play as a way to explore some of these concepts. I mean, I remember babysitting for a little girl, and I spent hours with her dollhouse and like little figures. I was not quite as like awake as I am now, but boy, we could have done a lot of good doll play in that dollhouse around, relationships and identities. And there's a lot that we could have done that, I missed the boat on. I'll have to look her up and apologize. So this is what you have. It looks like this. And there are, I think it's front and back, or however it comes out in the PDF. And so you'll see that there are kind of different examples or things like some language. And I didn't make these up, right? This is coming out of Raising Race Conscious Children. If you haven't checked that website out, check it out. It's really good. And so what I'm going to ask you to do for just about 5 minutes, I'm going to mix up these rooms, and I'm going to there should be 2 folks in the room, and what I want you to try is, let's see if this works. In the chat, I have a couple of like role play scenarios. Okay, so let's say I was in there with Erin. I'd be like, Erin, you want to be the kid or the adult? Erin, kid or adult?
I guess I'll be the kid.
Kid. Okay. So the kid is, the kid has just noticed a one-legged man in the grocery store, and it said very loudly,
"Why does that man have one leg?"
Okay, I'm going to go to my strategy sheet and I'm going to see if I can come up with some good language for you. Okay. And I'm going to just try it out. Do not talk about it, like actually try it out, because role playing and like having a discussion are really different. Try to do the role play, like really push yourself to be the parent and the kid. Okay. Also, I'm never 100% sure. You may be able to see these in the chat since you're all here now and you haven't left yet. They may, when you get into the breakout room, you may be able to see them. However, just in case you can't, you might want to try to take a screenshot of them and bring them with you. Do you know how to do that? And or copy them. And when you get into your room, maybe try pasting them into the chat. That might be possible. And if at least one person has access to them in the breakout room, that'll help. Okay, so it's a quickie. It's like a 4-minute. You're going to try to do at least one of these, not all, at least one, maybe 2. Maybe you could each be the kid. I don't know. And try out some of that language. All right. Go ahead, give it a shot.
I'm back because I realized I forgot to pause recording.
Folks, I know it's hard sometimes to just jump into role play, and I really pushed you to just like jump in, jump out. Okay, that's it, 4 minutes. Yeah, in my plan of plans, you had like 20 minutes to do that, but it's okay. It's a beginning, right? So as we close together, we have 3 minutes. This is how I really always like to close a session, because I know every time I leave a group of people, I have learnings, I have relearnings, I have appreciations, and I have regrets. Regrets are those things that we don't want to carry around with us. So the reason we include regrets in this kind of reflection time is to make sure that you're not walking away with anything that you're carrying. You can leave that here. You don't need to carry it around. So I'm going to stop the share so we can see each other's faces. I put those that prompt in the chat, and in these last 2 minutes, maybe we can actually stop the recording so people, if they want to speak, can feel free to speak their minds. But yeah, let's do this for the last now 2 minutes. Learnings, and feel free to